If you want stronger, bigger, more powerful glutes, one, just to have a nice looking ass, or you're trying to actually improve your performance, this is gonna be the video for you so that you stop doing stupid things that aren't gonna give you glute gains like clamshells and little simple glute bridges, and really pushing and maximizing that dump truck. Let's talk about it. Hey there, Brandon Splay here from Thirst Gym, and today I'm going to help you get rid of any kind of saggy butt, build some good quality glutes, and most importantly, help you sift through the bullshit that's on social media about what it takes to build a good, strong rear end. Now, the glutes are fantastic for improving hip extension, okay? Glutes are important for performance, but also looks. I understand that people, especially females, want to have a nice looking butt. Guys, you should too. But there's great ways to train them and inefficient ways to train them. So today I'm gonna walk you through everything you need to know about building a big, strong butt. All right, to start today, we're gonna first talk about some really quick anatomy lessons that you need to know about the glutes. The first thing that you need to know is if you want to build big, strong glutes, you need to focus on hip extension. Driving your leg backwards or bringing your body forwards using your glutes. While external rotation does happen through the glutes, they do externally rotate the femur, which can be great to help you feel your glutes contract. They're not the optimal movement to improve size and strength, especially when it comes to performance in terms of moving a mile of weight or sprinting or being a better athlete or changing direction. We really want to focus on the hip extension aspect of the glutes. And this happens in any kind of daily activity, whether it comes to bending over and picking stuff up, bridging off your back in a wrestling match, actually doing some kind of loaded carry and loading stones if you're doing that kind of thing, big time squats and deadlifts for you power lifters. Your glutes are an integral muscle group to improving your performance, but they're also linked to just having a healthier low back and stronger posterior chain. And so focusing on the hip extension part, I can't stress this enough. Hip extension is the #1 thing that you're gonna wanna focus on to maximize your glute gains. So make sure that you're doing things like your RDLs, your back extensions, your good mornings, your deadlifts, anything that's gonna drive hip extension as the primary movement is going to be the best thing that you can do. And ironically enough, these are generally the exercises that are gonna let you lift the most amount of load as well. So driving the biggest amount of load with the primary motion that we want from the glutes is gonna be the best way to maximize your gain. All right, the next thing we gotta talk about here though, if I'm being honest, is activation. And I hate that word activation. I wish there was a better term that I could use, but it's really what most people are gonna understand. And most people have what's called glute amnesia. And this was coined years ago in a book that I read. I can't remember who wrote it now. I wanna say it was Alan Cosgrove, but that your glutes are asleep. You're not feeling them. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And there are populations that probably actually have some glute amnesia. They can't actually squeeze their butt cheeks. I'm standing here, I'm able to squeeze my butt cheeks and feel them contract. I have that mind-muscle connection. Now, while I know it might seem like, hey, there's not that many people that exist like that, go out into the real world, find the average person that's walking down your Walmart aisle. First of all, they probably don't have an ass, and then second of all, they can't even actually contract it and know what it feels like. So for some people, being able to create that mind-muscle connection is important, because if we can't feel it contract and do what it's supposed to do, when we actually go into the weight room and do some kind of exercise or strength training, we're probably not gonna get as far as we can until we can do that. Even the big, strong power lifters and strength athletes that I've met through my years, there's many people that are missing deadlifts at the top and having issues actually getting their hips through because they don't focus on the smaller movements that are gonna help them activate, awaken, whatever you wanna call, feel their glutes actually contract. So the reason I bring this up is twofold. One, at the worst case scenario, it's just a really good warm-up, right? You're going to get things feeling, you're gonna drive some blood flow, you're actually gonna feel the contraction, relaxation, get that mind-muscle connection before you actually go to do those squats, deadlifts, lunges, and things of that nature. But if you don't have this, this is going to help you optimize and bridge that gap between your big muscles so that you can actually find your ass and glutes to lock that deadlift out, right? Get out of the hole of that squat, load up and pick things up, get that triple extension in your weightlifting movements, what have you. So yes, activation drills are corny and you don't need to do them, but I would argue there's really not a bad thing about them, just don't major in the minor. Use them as a warm-up if you need to, if this speaks to you. If you can't stand there, like I am right now, and feel your glutes contract and relax, you probably need to do some kind of isolation and activation-based drills just to be able to optimize the bigger movements we're gonna talk about. Okay, now that we got all that out of the way, the first thing you gotta do if you want to build big booty cheeks is you gotta hinge well. That sounds super simple, just looking at it, but the hardest movement for people to get in the weight room is a proper hip hinge. I coach this movement every single day from athletes 10 years old all the way up to their 60s and 70s, and people still botch the hinge, and it's one of the biggest motions and movements that I have to coach as an athlete to get athletes to do correctly, right? It's just something having that mind-muscle connection. I've talked about feeling the glutes doing the work, but learning how to separate your hips from your low back. Most people want to do one of two main ways to perform their hip hinge. They either want to use their low back to be able to form the extension, so they're doing lumbar extension to create that, or they're very hamstring dominant and their hamstrings are doing a large portion of the work, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we want to make sure that we can feel our glutes at the top when we come and actually lock it out. It doesn't mean you actually have to squeeze your butt cheeks as hard as you can to lock it out, but you do actually want to feel your butt. If you're doing RDLs and the next day your glutes are not sore at all, you didn't use your glutes effectively. Your hamstrings are certainly gonna be sore, but your glutes should be sore too. So making sure you do proper hip hinge based movements. The big one being the RDL or the good morning. Those are two that are gonna get a good quality hip hinge exercise and movement that's gonna maximize your glute gains. You can also do different deadlift variations as well, primarily conventional or sumo, but those are hip hinge dominant based exercises that are also gonna load the glutes through a big, strong range of motion and actually maximize the amount of load that you're gonna get in that hinge position. Again, you can also do things like 45-degree back extensions and things like that. I'll talk about that here a little bit more in the video, but the big thing here is single leg RDLs, Romanian deadlifts with a barbell. You could do different kettlebell swings, and deadlifts are probably gonna be the primary ways that you're going to hinge and get that movement down right, and it's gonna make everything a whole lot easier to get into big, strong glutes. Now that we have the hinging part covered, the next thing you need to understand is training in a stretched or lengthened position. One of the terms that I really like is strength at length. Being strong in a lengthened position is not only gonna make you a more resilient athlete, it's also gonna build an incredible amount of tissue and size, which is what we want if you're trying to build your butt. Now, the lengthened position doesn't have to be RDLs and good mornings. We can do different lunge and split squat variations to really maximize this, or even perform different squatting variations as well to get that good, strong, lengthened position of the glute. Getting a big range of motion then lets us maximize muscle fiber recruitment. And while sometimes you're not gonna be able to lift the most amount of weight here, we're gonna be able to lift the most amount of weight in a stretched position, which can then maximize hypertrophy. You're gonna find conflicting evidence whether you should train it stretched or not, but I'm here to tell you, don't listen to the Joel Seaman crap of this perfect above 90 degree stuff. If you have the ability to train below 90 degrees in a squat, do deep split squats, train in a stretched position with your RDLs and your good mornings, you're gonna build a way bigger and stronger butt and glutes than you would if you don't train in that stretched position. So ensure that whatever kind of training program you're doing, you're working in a stretched position with some or maybe even all of your variations. They don't have to all be that way, but it definitely needs to be a big portion of what you're doing to maximize your glute strength and size for that. Depending upon the exercises you're doing, I can't really give you particular sets and reps because the exercise will matter. As long as you're training generally in the normal hypertrophy ranges of 6 to 12 reps, you're probably gonna be in a good spot, but just make sure you're doing a hinging variation that's going to, one, check both boxes of that hinge that we talked about and be in a stretch position, and then also work on single leg work in that stretch position with different split squat and lunging variations, and you're really gonna be on a path to building good quality glute gain. All right, the next thing we gotta talk about here is the top end range of motion of your glute work. Now, this is the part that you're probably gonna actually feel your glutes really well. While we're not gonna maximize that stretched position, what we are going to do is actually focus on that mind-muscle connection, but with bigger loads. And this top end work really lets us overload the muscle. We can lift tremendously more weight in this position, because think about anytime you do a partial. If I do a bicep curl, I can do a lot more just here, and I'm probably gonna feel my bicep contract pretty well in that position. Versus down here, having to come all the way up, I can still feel the contraction, but actually feeling that squeeze or making that peak happens at the top portion. Same way with the glutes. While it's not necessarily going to be the way to get the most amount of a stretch on the muscle, it is going to let us increase the loading capacity, which then also helps us improve growth and size and strength and performance. So exercises that you can think here that work well are different kind of hip thrust variations or machines like that. You can do top end reverse hyper work, so you can just do the top end of the exercise or actually doing the full range of motion, or your 45-degree back extension or your back extension off a glute ham raise are ways to really focus on clenching those cheeks. These are going to be exercises you want to try to pretend like you're breaking a walnut between your butt cheeks. I don't know if you've ever heard that or not, but you want to be able to actually squeeze so hard, if something was in between your butt cheeks, it would crack and break. And so the back extension, the 45 degrees hyper, and the barbell hip thrust or hip thrust machines are the best way to maximize this contraction and feel it at the top. In terms of your compound movements, this might be high rack pulls or high block pulls from a conventional based stance, because again, we can maximize the amount of load that we're doing there. And while it's not a big range of motion, and it's probably not necessarily going to build the biggest deadlift in the world, but if you're having a hard time getting your ass through on your deadlift, maximizing your positioning and increasing the loading potential of what you can do with just your glutes, taking your back and your hamstrings out of the equation, is a fantastic way to improve that lockout. So don't overlook this in terms of improving your glute gains, because one, the loading potential is what's really going to do it here, not so much the stretch position or the range of motion. So therefore, effort is key. You have to load these exercises up and really push them, but also make sure you're feeling your glutes do the work and you're not using different muscles like your low back and the back extension, or too much of your hamstrings in like an RDL or any kind of other hinge variation there. All right, one of the most overlooked and underrated things that you can do to improve your glutes are different carries and loading variations. And the reason I say this is because most people don't think about, oh, I can build my glutes through carries and whatnot. Think about when you pick up heavy dumbbells or kettlebells and you're walking for a long duration. Take your grip out of the equation here for a second. Think about how much your glutes having to perform hip extension to push you forward with more weight that you normally have. Now, I know it's not the exact linear line of pull, right? But you're still having to perform hip extension to finish your in phase of gait. Your toe off portion of gait is going to actually get your glute. There's actually a very good research study showing that your big toe extension is linked to your glute activation and how your glute is contracting while you're doing. So if you really want to try to feel your glute while you walk, focusing on your toe off and your big toe, and you will feel your glute actually contract really well in that position. So makes sense that if we do this with a loaded variation with really heavy farmer's handles, kettlebells, dumbbells, what have you, we're going to load those glutes up as well. The other thing you can think about here is also using a prowler or a sled or something that you're dragging, which is then going to give you that load resistance, and then you can really focus on just that hip extension portion. So doing heavy sled drags and pushes can really improve your glute gains, but the other benefit there is they're probably not going to be as sore either, being a concentric only based action. The other thing you can think here is more strongman based stuff. Anytime you're going to like load stones or lift something up, pick up a sandbag, that picked up position here is going to require a good quality glute contraction. So anytime you're going to take an object and hold it here, whether it be a Zercher based position, a stone, a sandbag, an actual person maybe, whatever it is, as you're going to do that hip extension, you're going to have to use your glutes to stay here, because if you don't, you're going to have to arch through your low back to be able to do everything, and we don't want that. So bringing my hips forward and holding that position is a great way to improve your glute gains. If you really like to do strongman based stuff, another great way to train your glutes that you're probably not really thinking about. All right, another thing you're probably not thinking about when it comes to your glute gains is using accommodating resistance or bands and chains in your exercise selection. When it comes to like doing your deadlifts and your squats, usually using bands and chains get a lot of flack from the people who are like, oh, accommodating resistance doesn't have any kind of specificity or carryover. Louis Simmons is crazy, blah, blah, blah. Say what you want to say, but the science is going to show that by using accommodating resistance, we can accommodate the strength curve. And so what that means is when we go down into like a bottom of a squat and we have bands or chains on there, yes, the load is less in the bottom, but as we go to come up, our glutes are going to have to continue to drive forward, and that resistance is going to meet us at the top and accommodate that strength curve to give us the best of both worlds, especially if you're doing this from a stretch position, like in a split squat or a regular squat and having band resistance. You're gonna find that your glutes get absolutely torched from doing this because you're accommodating that strength curve, you're using the stretched position that we talked about, and you're getting that clenched based work or that top end based work, which you're challenging that as well. So lots of great benefits come from accommodating resistance for your deadlift, not only from your strength gains or your squat for your strength gains and improving that, that's fantastic, or improving your speed when it comes to using it for dynamic effort work to jump higher and be more explosive. Those are all fantastic. But in terms of maximizing your glute gains, it's a great way to benefit those stretched exercises that we talked about and blend them with that clenched or top end based exercises to get the most of them. Bands will beat you up, however, so be cautious. You don't want to use them all the time, but definitely run 3, 4, 5, 6 week waves of using bands or chains and then remove them and swap out some exercises and experiment with some other things. But I do think it is worth mentioning that you should be using bands on some stuff if you really want to maximize your glute gains. Like an RDL, for example, would be a fantastic exercise with bands to really destroy your glutes and your hamstrings, I might add, but at the same time get the benefits of both the training methodologies that we talked about here. So don't sleep on bands. But before you try to just go throw them on things, doing them on things like a back extension or say the glute machine or a barbell hip thrust, considering those are like top in and just really clinch based positions, that stretch position isn't really maximized all that well. And so you're just really reinforcing the clenching. Again, not a bad thing. I'm not against them. You're gonna feel some really good contractions. So again, if you wanna feel those contractions, that's great. But using them with stretch-based exercises are probably the best way to get the best bang for your buck from bands and chains. All right, the last thing we gotta talk about here is implementation. How do you take all this information that I just threw at you and put it together to build a big, strong ass and something that looks good when you're naked? Well, the first thing you gotta understand here is we've gotta blend everything together, but bias it towards what you need most. I can't tell you what that is because I don't know you personally, but I can give you 2 camps that you probably fall into. You're probably one, that really strong person that squats and deadlifts and does RDLs and what have you, do those big global exercises, but you may not be optimizing what you're getting from your glutes because you're not feeling them do any kind of work. You're biasing things towards your low back and your hamstrings while you're doing movements. You may benefit from doing some activation trace drills just in your warm-up to get things feeling and feeling that mind-muscle connection, maybe using a machine or two, like a hip thrust machine or a barbell glute bridge, something like that, top-end reverse hyper, to really just feel those glutes actually do the work. And it's gonna give you more or a return on investment side on the big exercise you're already doing, but now you're gonna get that stimulus, that mind-muscle connection to get the glutes to actually get involved in the exercise. That would be the first camp. The second camp are gonna be those of you that are just too scared to lift any weight. Okay, if you're stuck with the booty bands and doing the Jane Fonda crap, you're not gonna maximize what you can get from your ass in your training. So you need to just go do some of the big motions. You probably have that mind-muscle connection down really well. Now it's time to load it up with back squats, split squats, good mornings, RDLs, deadlifts. Those are all fantastic things to maximize your glute gains. And generally speaking, this tends to be the women that do this because they usually are initially a little put off by lifting heavy. But I assure you, if you lift and train relatively hard, try to have some general progression, you're gonna see your butt explode in terms of your size and your strength. Now, how do we put together a program like this? If you really just want to focus on just your glutes, 2 days a week is probably going to be plenty. If you're doing more than 2 days a week of just glute emphasis work, you're probably not training hard enough when you're doing those. So going back and recapping, you want to have 1 or 2 exercises that really focus on those stretched positions. Again, RDLs, split squats, and barbell or any kind of squat variation in general, but squats are great ways to do that, to get that stretch position and maximize the load with the weights that we're doing. If you want to have some fun, put some bands and chains on there to really top it off. Then you're going to want to do some things to help you feel the glutes, the top end aspect of it. This could be, again, your reverse hypers, your back extensions, and you can also even do like a glute machine or a barbell hip thrust, all fantastic things. You can put those towards the end with a little bit higher reps, really focusing on good contraction and relaxation and drive a ton of blood into your glutes. Then if you want to do something like a finisher, go for it. I'm all for that if that's something that you want to do. Me personally, I like to do different sled variations, loaded carries. Those would be ways to maximize that, but also get full body training out of that day as well. So that's a good general sequence that you can use. And then you really want to focus on just general progression. Try to add weight. General linear progression is undefeated when it comes to looking at things in small chunks. Trying to progressively add load or add reps every single time you go into train. And if you do this and stack this up over 4, 6, and 8 week training cycles over the course of a year, next thing you know, you're gonna have a big old booty. So there you have it. There's how you're gonna build a nice big juicy rump with everything that I've got from the education side with the plan to be able to do so. Well, I didn't walk you out through the exact workout that I would probably do, because again, I don't know you and I don't know what you need. I at least gave you a general template and understand how you can focus things to get you the most from your glute gains for what you need. If you happen to take away one awesome thing from today's video, I'd really appreciate you hitting that like button, leave a comment, share with a friend, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next video.